Before Elvis, Sinatra, and Bing Crosby, he was the first hard-living rock star of his time. We're talking about Best Picture Oscar winner Amadeus. Don't go anywhere.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff. And Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. Oscars month continues. This is our second episode of our second season doing this, Eric, right? This is our second year that we have devoted to the month of March just to do episodes about Best Picture Oscar-winning films.
Yeah, we got a great one tonight. We have some great people with us as well.
Well, you know what, though? I mean, this is like shooting fish in a barrel because every episode should be great because these are all Best Picture winners. So these are we're picking Highlander and, stuff that people may not, these are certified Academy Award winning films. So theoretically, we can't go wrong.
No, we can't.
Theoretically.
Many other things we can go wrong with.
Yes. Yeah. In theory, it can't go wrong. And as we do, we've got two guests with us. And let's start with Mr. Ready Speaker himself, Mr. Roland Arucci. Welcome aboard. Great to have you back. He is the creator of the Ready Speaker podcast. You can find that on YouTube. Go ahead and give him a subscribe. If you're watching us on YouTube, like and subscribe here first, then go see Mr. Roland Arucci at Ready Speaker. We'll put a link in the show notes as well. For those of you listening on your favorite podcast platform, you can then hit the show notes and there'll be a link there and it'll take you to his channel. Welcome, Roland.
Thank you very much. Pleasure being here.
Like a gleam in his eye. That smile on his face. Yeah, that's a great smile.
I'm drinking.
You know why? He loves those $50 intros that I give him. I mean,
dude, I tell you,
each one is getting longer and longer.
I have no idea why we're not dating. It's crazy. Because the energy's there.
Well, we're working on it. You know what? After this glass of wine, we'll see. Following up after that is Mr. Christopher Clark making his, I don't know, this is like 5 or 6, number 5.
A 5-timer. So there you go. You're officially
5-timer and
5-time club.
Sorry, we don't have any robes to give out or anything, but I don't know. Maybe throw him a T-shirt his way or something, right?
Yeah, I just got these cool stickers made. They're made out of wood. They're actually made out of wood.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
They're wooden stickers. There's one over here.
And I got my can cozy from trivia night.
Yeah, he was.
Oddly enough, now I can say you've given me wood. Look at that.
I haven't given you wood yet until I hand it to you. Until I put it in your hand, Roland.
We're starting. These gentlemen have not met yet. These two gentlemen. So Chris, this is Roland. Roland, this is Chris. So we got kind of a mix. We like mixing it up. It's great. Yeah.
And Chris, is this your first film episode?
This is my first film one. Yeah, kind of a nice transition considering the theme of the movie to go from music to movies with this flick.
This is what they call a bridge episode for people that have done only music episodes. We're going to bridge you into the films with a music-centric film. So let's get into the stats. For those of you that are new here, we kind of give you some factual information at the top of the show that you can kind of file it away. It's good trivia knowledge, good fun stuff to carry. And then we get into the wild speculation, fan theories, bad impressions. All that other stuff is to come. It will be here eventually. But first, this was released in September of 1984, directed by Milos Forman, written by Peter Schaffer, based on his 1979 Broadway play, and played in England, played everywhere, Amadeus. This had an $18 million budget, $90 million box office. That's a lot of money in 1984, and it's a lot of money for this type of film as well. We got to keep that in your rear view mirror as we talk about this. Nominated for 11 Oscars.
Unbelievable.
11 Oscars in 1984 is a bonanza. It won 8. It won for Best Sound, Best Makeup, Best Costume Design, Art Direction, Adapted Screenplay, Best Actor, F. Murray Abraham. Chris, do you know what the F stands for in F. Murray Abraham?
I do not.
It stands for fabulous.
He is fabulous. He was fabulous in this movie.
And that is from his own words. When I saw an interview years ago and they're like, what does the F stand for? He's like, fabulous.
I could see him doing that.
He was, besides F. Murray Abraham winning for Best Actor, Tom Hulce was also nominated for Best Actor. Obviously, only one of them could win, and it was F. Murray Abraham. One for Best Director for Milos Forman. And then, of course, why we're doing this episode, it won for Best Picture. So that's a gaggle of awards. That's a lot of hardware for, a movie of this type. Now, I'll start off. I'll be honest. When this came out in 1984, I was not on top of this film. I had preconceived notions about these types of films. When you see these period pieces rolling, it always seems like these types of films are like stuffed shirts. Like with the flamboyant talk of the time and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of passed on this. I remember when it came out. I remember when it won all this stuff, but I was like, it's just one of those, period pieces. Is that kind of,
for me,
how did you come to it?
It was an HBO movie. It was a super son in Brooklyn, and we had free HBO, so there was no cost involved, and that's sort of where we went with it. I same thing. It was obviously I knew who Mozart was, but I remember the billboards and everything with Amadeus on the subway and the buses. So I thought it was a puff piece maybe, and just something I wasn't gonna like. I was still looking for another Star Wars at that point in my life, or some dystopian future film. That probably leads to the zombies. But I remember when I saw it on HBO, I did watch it several times, and it was because of F. Murray Abraham. Just I know he gets first credit in it, and it's rightfully they negotiate that, but rightfully so. Yeah. Because the guy even rewatching it again, he just pulls you along this whole film. At least for me, he just pulls me along with every moment that he gives in all its layers. He's a very complicated character. Yeah. And it's all its layers. I do find it funny it won for Best Sound because it has to be for the music because not the dialogue. Yeah,
actually, since you mentioned Best Sound, I forgot to mention that this soundtrack is actually one of the best-selling classical releases of all time, and I do have it on LP. I do have it. Oh my God, I love this soundtrack. This is like one of my favorite films, and it should be a no-brainer because it's not really a soundtrack per se. It is, but it's Mozart's music, so it's kind of an easy thing. And just a little piece of trivia before I get over to Chris. This was conducted by Neville Marriner, and the orchestra is the St. Martin in the Fields Orchestra. When they approached Neville Marriner to do the soundtrack, he said, I'll do it only under the condition that we use the actual Mozart arrangements. I don't want anything recent, anything that's been adapted or reinterpreted. We want to use the actual Mozart scores and charts as he wrote them. So not only we're getting, Mozart's music, we're getting Mozart's music as it was written, not interpreted or kind of fluffed up or changed. It's the actual chart. So, Chris, how did you come to this movie?
Well, I was only 5 when it came out, so actually, it's one of those like Roland was saying. It was one of those HBO movies. I feel like I've only ever seen up until preparing for the podcast. It was one of those movies I feel like I've only ever seen in like pieces. Like I always distinctly remember when he, the opening scene where he's talking to the priest, and the scene where they first meet Mozart when he walks in. Like there's all these parts, and I never saw it in one cohesive piece until actually I sat down to watch it and prepare. And that's part of the reason why I volunteered to do this, is because it's one of those ones I've always heard so much about and wanted to see. And to me, it really kind of lived up to everything that I was hoping. When I told my dad I was going to be on this podcast, oh, that's a phenomenal movie. It's so fantastic. You're going to, so it really kind of lived up to my expectations when I watched it. So
cool. Right. Eric, we definitely didn't see this in the theater. At least I didn't see it in the theater. And so I didn't see it with you. So where did you come in on this as well?
I think I probably rented it. It was much later. I know that it was well into the 90s that I saw it. Yeah. It's not that I love like big films, but this particular case, I'm kind of like with you. I really didn't know what it was. I mean, based on the poster art, you just kind of like, is this a play? Is it, what's it, what's the theme of this thing? And I know it's, from one end you see bits and parts of the movie. The only thing that I saw was Holtz's laugh. And that just completely turned me off to the film. It's like, I'm not going to watch this idiot for 2.5 hours, laughing like that, like a buffoon. But when I did see the film, I was like, boy, what an experience it was. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Much like Chris, I saw bits and pieces of this film probably on cable or somewhere. And what struck me about the film and what turned me around on this film was that they were speaking like regular, quote unquote, regular people.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't this thou and this kind of like language that you would expect to hear in this type of a period piece drama. They were talking like regular people and interacting in regular ways. And I'm like, oh, wow, it was very unique. I'm like, well, I want to see more of this because it was subverting my expectations of the way I thought about those pieces. Right, Chris?
Well, yeah. And to me, the other thing, to your point is that they didn't try to like fake it with accents. Like it wasn't like they had somebody doing like a half cocked German accent or a poor Italian. Like they just acted and they played the parts without like kind of hamming it up, which I think is what kind of made it flow and move as well as it did without having to endure that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think that's what made it also very accessible. Also, right, is it that kind of making this an easy, even though it's a pretty long film, even before the director's cut, 161 minutes, and now the only way you can get it is the director's cut, which is 3 hours.
It doesn't feel like a 3-hour movie though.
Yeah, and it's fun. It's funny at the time. Milos Forman said, he goes back in '84 when we were making this, he goes, MTV was like a big thing. No one, people weren't going to go see a movie about classical music and this type of thing. So we wanted to keep the movie short. So I cut out everything that really wasn't really germane to the plot to keep it lean and to keep it watchable. And then in 2002, he restored it and added an extra 20 minutes of footage, which is now what's called the director's cut. And it did add a lot of stuff. I personally think the original version is perfectly fine. I'm perfectly okay with it. Roland, what do you got?
Yeah, same thing. But maybe this. I don't remember the original version. I'll be honest with you. And I had to watch this, and it was a long 3 hours. It was probably a longer start than a longer finish. I don't know if that makes sense. It took me a while to sort of like get into it, but I do like the acts. But it's probably more than like 3 acts. Movies are like 3 acts usually. This to me is more than 3 acts. You have essentially an epilogue. Right at the beginning, and that's all they're going through with his boobage, the cleavage, the sceneries, and they're doing like really wide shots of the costumes, and it just gets narrower and narrower, and then you get to the story. So I almost feel like it's almost like a novel, the way this is like a well done novel, adaptation to me at least, and maybe that's the only way even to tell a whole life of success, and we're talking about his whole life of success, not from birth, but. And so maybe that's why he needed that extra time, because in the original you pretty much have a preface, and then you have the other stuff that's really the story. And maybe that's what he felt was missing. For me, I definitely moved by the end.
Yeah. I mean the stuff that there's 2 major pieces that were added. The extended scene when Stanzi goes to see Salieri.
Okay.
When Mozart is trying to get the teaching job and they're stonewalling him, and he says, "Come back later."
Yeah,
and she's like that whole extended scene there of her, stripping down and then that was not in the film. It pretty much ended when he walked away in their first meeting, and then another major chunk was when Mozart went to go see he was going to teach the girl for the guy that had all the dogs. That scene was not in there whatsoever. So then there's an additional scene when he comes back later in the film and he's drunk and looking for money. Those 2 scenes were not in the film. They add a little. The great Kenneth McMillan, who plays the father in those scenes, is a great character actor. He basically was not in the film until these restored scenes because he does not appear except for in those 2 cut scenes. So let's get to the cast, and then we'll kind of toss that around because there's a lot to chew on. Like we said, F. Murray Abraham as Antonio Salieri. These are all real people. There is, Peter Schaffer said, hey, this is a fantasy. This is not, not based in reality, meaning that Salieri tried to kill Mozart. Although in letters between Mozart and his father, Mozart did complain about Salieri, and he did complain about the Italians. He felt that the Italians were blocking him from doing things. So there's that part of it, but not that Salieri was actively trying to kill Mozart. Tom Hulce as Mozart. Elizabeth Berridge as Constanze Mozart, also known as Stanzi. Now, she was not originally, she's not the original actress.
Meg Tilly.
Meg Tilly was hired and ready to go. The day before shooting starts, she tears a tendon in her ankle or her knee playing soccer. So she's out. They get a couple of other people in really quick to test, and Elizabeth Berridge got it. Roy Dotrice as Leopold Mozart, the father. Simon Callow as Schikaneder. He's the kind of the people's opera guy. He actually played Mozart in the English stage version of it. Christine Ebersole as Caterina Cavalieri. We know her, Eric, from SNL.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? She was on SNL up until 82, and then all of a sudden she's in this film.
Yeah, and if that's her voice, is that her really singing?
Good question. I don't think I'm going to say probably not, but it could be
really.
Well, she does sing in real life, but
convincing to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
But be. Man, if that's the case, she's got the pipes.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, that was.
And then we've got Jeffrey Jones as Emperor Joseph II. Yeah. Wow, there it is.
Yeah,
Charles Kay as Count Orsini Rosenberg. Kenneth McMillan, like I said, he's Michael Schlumberger, who is not in the film in the theatrical release whatsoever, but is in it quite a bit in the director's cut. Kenny Baker, R2-D2.
The token, yeah.
He's in the parody, the People's Opera version of Don Giovanni. He comes in riding on the horse. Yeah. Which is great. And then, Barbara Byrne as Frau Weber, which is Costanzi's mother. Patrick Hines as Kapellmeister Giuseppe Bono. This guy is a sweaty mess in this film.
Oh my God, yeah.
Barely has any lines. He's not Italian. He's like from New York. That was the thing. Milos Forman actually... Kenneth Branagh wrote in his autobiography that he was actually testing for Amadeus up until the point when Milos Forman decided to go with almost a strictly American cast. So Patrick Hines as Giuseppe Bono, I thought the guy was Italian also because he didn't really say much and everything he said was Italian. Yeah. Unfortunately, he passed away the year after this film came out.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, it's too bad. He was only 55 years old. Chris, what do you got?
I was going to say, in addition to Kenneth Branagh, didn't Mark Hamill petition to be Mozart as well? He was trying to get that role, and Milos Forman didn't want anything to do with it.
Well, Mark Hamill had played Mozart. He played Amadeus on Broadway. He followed Tim Curry. Yeah. So Tim Curry was the original Mozart, and then Mark Hamill played him on Broadway. Milos Forman brought in Mark Hamill to read with the women that they were screen testing for the lead. Right. And then Milos Forman said, you know what? I don't want to go with Mark Hamill because in 1984, he was Luke Skywalker.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much all he was. Yeah. And he didn't want Mark Hamill to be a distraction.
Yeah, Tim Curry, he went for this. He went for this role too, didn't he?
Yeah. He originated the role on Broadway.
Yeah. I mean, knowing that Tim Curry is perfect. Not taking away from this performance, but knowing what he could do with it as well.
Oh yeah, that the flamboyance and and that rock star attitude and that also the what's the word I'm looking for? The braggadocio, that Mozart had, at least this version of Mozart had, he definitely could have brought up. And then Ian McKellen at one point played Salieri on Broadway.
Wow.
So yeah, a lot of big names played in this throughout its run, Chris.
I don't see Meg Tilly as Costanza at all. Like that to me, I almost feel like just knowing the parts that she's played in the past, she's one of
Well,
those ones where I'm like,
not Jennifer Tilly, but Meg Tilly.
Meg Tilly. I'm thinking of Jennifer Tilly. You're right.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm thinking of, like,
there's a
yeah,
big contrast between
yeah,
Meg.
Yeah. Sorry, my bad.
Meg Tilly and Jennifer Tilly are sisters, but they are vastly different.
I'm thinking of the wrong sister.
I think physically she would have rivaled the girl that played her. But Meg, you don't see her in much though.
Not anymore. Yeah.
So
yeah, she was kind of big. And then rounding out the cast, a very young Cynthia Nixon as Laurel, the maid.
Yeah,
she was like a kid.
Yeah,
she's very young.
Yeah.
And then one more, Vincent Schiavelli, who must be a Milos Forman favorite because he was in Cuckoo's Nest. He's the valet in the very beginning. If you don't come out, we'll eat all this and you'll get none of it. And it's, something like and probably that's. I think I remember when I saw that scene in the beginning. That's what started to turn me. I'm like, these are talking like regular people. Like we made this great dessert for you. Come on out. So come on out and. It seemed like it had a different energy, this film, than those period pieces that I was assuming that it was going to be. So that's pretty much the cast. Speaking about Tom Hulse and how Eric found that laugh annoying, and it can be grating, and it's kind of there. Tom Hulse said he only found that laugh, after drinking a bottle of whiskey. It came to after finishing a bottle of whiskey. It came to him. Which is pretty interesting, Roland.
Yeah, I think it sort of fits with the character with his nervousness to try and sort of like get past moments. I think it's a great. Again, I thought it was like you said. I thought, and Eric said, I thought it was grating as a kid when I watched. I was like, oh, this is so. How much can I listen to this? But you notice when he did it, it was always to hide his discomfort. It was always an awkward pause, and he didn't know how to react or say anything to get the expressions out of his head. So watching it. The movie did pull me in again. Whoever hasn't seen it, please watch it because it's friggin'. I know it's 3 hours, but it's a story that's very rare to see in a film. The story really pulls you along, and you find these little quirks, and that's I think one of the best quirks of the film, of that character,
is the laugh.
Yeah,
it shows his kind of his insecurity. It's almost like a, especially when he kind of like goes like a ha.
He doesn't know.
When he's not doing the full laugh, it's like that kind of. He'll say something, especially in one of my favorite scenes is the scene when he's going to see Emperor Joseph, right, about his new play, and it's a banned play, and when he's trying to explain things, and he's kind of in front of everybody. That nervous laugh comes out a lot in those scenes where he kind of says things, and and he has a great line. He goes, I'm a vulgar man, but my music is not vulgar. And it's just kind of a great,
it is. It's a great piece.
Just a great thing. Could this be considered, Eric? Is this a murder mystery without the murder?
Oh, absolutely. It goes to some dark places for sure. Yeah. And that's what really surprised me about it. Cause again, I didn't know what it was. It's not your typical biopic. It is it's a lot of it is just, made up or just, I guess, they like the idea of Salieri doing this to him and, that they're rivals and he's just secretly just kind of just doing him dirty, the whole time. And it's just, it's a shame to watch, but you see the character of Mozart and what he's going through. And I just love the scenes but Salieri, like every time he's like envisioning his music, the look on his face is just, but it's heartbreaking. And it makes you wonder, like this is definitely within the time, like this could be applied to modern day with two rock stars, like rivals or any musicians that are, that are one considered better than the other who, somebody comes along and just blows you out of the water. And it's just like, that kind of thing. So I was really taken with that part of the story, so Chris, you had something to say.
Yeah. Sorry. The thing that it made me think of is, you always hear about when like Hendrix came to England and played for the first time and all the rock stars are watching him and their mouths are on the floor and they don't know what to do. Like Salieri's reaction had a lot of that vibe, or what I would have thought about like when Clapton and Townsend are watching Hendrix for the first time in some club in England.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Clapton and Hendrix didn't try and.
No, they didn't try and murder him. No.
I mean,
No.
Clapton and Townsend didn't try and
No,
murder
they didn't try
Hendrix.
to murder. No, they didn't. But
or drive him crazy.
no,
Right. Yeah.
We don't know. We don't know.
this is true.
We don't. Well, there was that that I think it was made for TV. It was Andre 3000. Did it even come out that he played Jimi Hendrix, and then the guy playing Clapton, like apparently just like threw his guitar down and walked off stage in tears because he was so like, you know, like
so blown away
by it. I don't know if that really happened or not, but
probably.
But but that kind of thing, you know, like that again, you know, you hear about all of these, you know, famous bands, and you know, like Simon and Garfunkel and Lennon and McCartney, and and you start, boy, like somebody could really go to town with that kind of thing with these guys too. You know, like you can like just make up some kind of loosely based thing and really take it to that level. You know, so, that would be something.
Chris, first rock star. I said that in the open. Is Mozart like that? You know, because he was that revered and he was in the public eye since he was a child. He wrote his first operas or first music at age 4 or 5.
I definitely see like I mean, the movie draws a lot of parallels, but you also got to think like, you know, hundreds of years later, people know him. And if they know classical music, there's like maybe 3 classical composers they're going to know. And Mozart's one of them. So like, to me, you know, the way his music carries on, I think that's got a lot of rock star element to it. And I definitely feel like Foreman played on that in the movie as well, even beyond just like the reaction he received from Salieri and, you know, the other court composers and all that kind of stuff. Just even like the way the emperor didn't want him to, you know, do the Marriage of Figaro, and, you know, the way the Pope and the church was acting towards him in his hometown, and just that whole idea of like a record company almost like trying to, you know, rein in an artist and tell an artist how to do things and how things should be. So you definitely see like Foreman saw it that way, because I feel like he played on that a lot in different moments, and even just living that wild lifestyle and then being shown that he got away with certain things because he was so fantastic in certain aspects. Like, you definitely see throughout the movie that that's what Foreman sees as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think even to add on to it, I think it's also the audiences and their reaction that he's doing in the Imperial Court or the Imperial Theater or whatever, just for the king. And then he's doing all these productions in theater for the everybody. And there's kids running around, and there's old ladies with no teeth being enamored with it. And then they're like falling over their seats watching it. And seeing him in how popular he was with all the stratus of society was a very interesting. It's there. It's just in the background of the movie. You don't pick up on it like directly, but it's a great way of layering the story of who he was and how important he was musically. At the time.
Yeah,
very much like a rock star.
Yeah, Schikaneder actually alludes to that later in the film when he says to Mozart, "You could write anything you want, whatever you want, we'll do it." So he didn't have to, you know, at the we'll call it the People's Theater. He didn't have to submit his stuff or audition or try to, you know. Schikaneder was like, "Do whatever you want." He said, "The crazier, the better." You know, no matter how crazy it is, the common people are gonna love it. They're going to eat it up. They were, you know, probably looking for that that kind of stuff.
More his friends than anybody. The way they interacted, he felt most comfortable there. He wasn't trying to live above his class, unlike Salieri, who came from a small town as well, but was a court composer, and he reveled in it. And I think Mozart was, at least in his film, he was very comfortable with those. Were his friends. Those are the people he was going to have a drink with, that he was going to invite home to dinner. He didn't interact with the other people in the same way, same energy.
Yeah, you make a good point. Every time they show him partying, it's with those people, right? They never show him party. Then again, the guys in the court would never be caught dead doing that anyway. Those guys,
even Mozart going to see the play, he's out in the open. Salieri's hidden. He doesn't want to be seen there, but Mozart is there with his family. I mean, it's even like, I'm here with my kid. I'm exposing my child to this.
Yeah,
which is, that's, again, these are subtle, director's choices of how to portray it. But it shows, to me, again, it shows, to your point about it, is he the rock star of that? Yeah, he was. He was the rock star for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think it's and they treated him that way. And they showed the hard living, they showed the drinking, they showed the excessive spending, right, Eric? I mean, they kind of
Mhm.
gave you that. This could almost have been like the Doors movie, like of its
Yeah.
time, right? They kind of showed the excess and him having to borrow money and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think a lot of the people were enamored with him because he was such a free spirit and he just did, these amazing things. Even though I love the scene where he's taking Salieri's tune and he's, just kind of just doing his thing over that. And it was like an insult to Salieri. I don't know if he was actively trying to insult the guy, but I just think he's just, just playing around. And this, like, he's giving it what it needed in his mind, I guess. Right. I mean, but people were loving it, but except Salieri, of course, he's just like, what a great, the faces on F. Murray Abraham's.
Oh
I
my
mean,
God,
that alone throughout the whole film is like, that's what you're watching it for.
Yeah.
So
Same for me. This movie, some of the supporting cast, sometimes there are movies that are led by a lead, and sometimes there's a strong lead and a great supporting cast.
Yeah.
This is one of those movies where there's missteps everywhere. You can always look for a misstep, but the majority of this film, everyone just really does every little thing to make it real, to make it land. And like you're saying, Eric, with the face expressions, oh my God! Like every time somebody does something, you feel it. You feel the moments.
Even as him in the beginning when he's like aged, even those eerie faces. I mean, it was just he's smiling, he's crying, he's just such a range of emotion, and just and within like 2 minutes of screen time, it was like, wow, I'm already in, So
and then even like the people like giving each other looks when he's doing something they feel like he shouldn't be doing, and it's just those little eye movements to let you know everything you need to know about how they feel about what he's doing or what they're going to ultimately say about his performances or his writing or his choices on stage. And it really is. So much is said in this movie without really ever sometimes even saying anything.
Yeah. You make a good point. That royal court, because they're all kind of, that's their little clique. So yeah, they'll do like a side glance to one another, and they kind of know, okay, this is never going to happen. We're never going to approve this play or marriage. Especially in that Figaro scene, especially in the Marriage of Figaro scene with Count Orsini Rosenberg, right? He's the one that really is lobbying against it. And you can see when Mozart says to Emperor Joseph, he goes, "Please, just let me tell you how it begins. I'll just do that. Let me tell you how it begins." And you can see the Emperor Jeffrey Jones is kind of intrigued, and then they go back to Rosenberg, and he's kind of looking at the Emperor like almost like don't fall for that trap. Don't. And then he's like, "Yeah, humor me." And then he does it, and then all of a sudden it's become a play. Let's get back to F. Murray Abraham, because this guy is the anchor. And Roland, you said it the best in the beginning, that there's so many layers to what F. Murray Abraham is doing, because he's not I don't look at him as the villain, right? He's not the villain. He's not the mustache twirling villain of this story, because he loves the music. There are so many instances in this film where he's doing things behind Mozart's back, but every time someone asks him, "What did you think of the music?" It's miraculous. It's like he can't not acknowledge it. So it's jealousy, but he's also not saying in front of other people, "Oh, this is shit. It sucks." Like when he goes to see Stanzi, and she's like, "What did you think?" And he's like, "It's miraculous." Like he can't help but acknowledge it, Roland.
It's funny because I was, we do what's your favorite scene?
Yeah.
For usually the end of this. And I was like prepping myself. I'm like, okay, making notes and everything. And all I could think was every scene where Salieri honestly says he loves the music.
Mm-hmm.
And every scene he does that, it's so grounded and so real. And I think he has a battle of, born talent and learned talent. And he's more of a learned talent. And he has reached his ceiling, and it kills him, because he can't be born with any more than he learned.
Yeah.
And whereas Mozart is born talent, and he just keeps learning constantly. He hears, there's a scene where he sees his mother-in-law squawking, and he writes a new opera with that voice. Because it finally hit him. He has an epiphany on these little nuanced things that just become music for him. And showing that born talent is different. And Salieri, with all those layers, and even the scene that was added with the wife, as you brought up earlier, that was probably the scene that got me the most into the movie. Not for the boobage, but for the fact that you could see he's broken. He didn't want that to happen. He wanted an out. He wanted an out.
Yeah.
And now he has to figure a way to do something. And there's such you can see it. And like I said, not evil in some ways, he's just misguided, but not a real true villain. But that was every scene after that. I'm like, wow, it just gets deeper and more layered and deeper and more layered. And it's just impressive work, really is.
Yeah, Chris. Before I get to you, it's perfect. At the end, he says, "I'm the patron saint of mediocrity." Like he understood his, like you said, his level. Like he understood his boundaries, that he was never going to ascend to that. So the only way to ascend to it is to take from Mozart himself, and that that's where you get the whole plot about the death mass and the death. He's going to write his own death mass and composed by his best friend Salieri, and that was which is a great thing. But again, the character is very pathetic in some ways, right? Because he understands his mediocrity, and power. The only way he can do it is to lash out and take revenge. Over to you, Chris.
What I was going to say is I think a big part of that character, and I think F. Murray Abraham did really well with all of that struggle, is that crisis of faith. Like, that whole idea of like, God, I've done everything you've asked me to do. I did everything I promised you. I've been faithful to you. I've dedicated my life to you and my music and, taken a vow of chastity and all these kind of things. And then you watch Mozart and he's doing a lot of the stereotypical rock star things that we think of today. And he can just on the spot, like, do all the things that we've already talked about, that he could it just oozes from him, and it's like almost effortless. And like you said, Salieri has to work for it, and he doesn't understand why God would choose him and not choose Salieri, who has chosen to be so faithful. And that's when he finally, that whole idea of when he abandons his faith, during that whole period with where Costanza comes to him is a huge part of that transition and the character.
Yeah, and when he burns the cross, he from now on, I'm your enemy. Like, I'm going to do everything I can to subvert you. And, in his conversations with God. But Eric, for me, one of the things that drew me to this film is the scenes with Salieri when he's explaining the music. So there are scenes when he's looking at the music and we hear it. But then there's times when he's explaining, like to the priest in the beginning, like, diminish one note, and it would be, the whole thing would fall apart. And just the way he has that reverence for speaking about music kind of gets you into the music, because when he's explaining it, or, it starts off with a single oboe and then caressed by a flute, like the way it's written so lovingly makes you kind of want to listen to the music and hear it the way he's hearing it.
Absolutely. It's kind of like a somebody trying to get you into their favorite group or favorite album or something like that. And just, check this out. It's like, I felt it was a necessary component to the film, because otherwise you may not just jump in and want to listen, because classical music is very difficult genre to get into if you're not, but to have somebody there to kind of draw you in, and the way he describes it and just the emotion of it, and he closes his eyes and he's just, and he's envisioning it. It was almost a part of it was a creative choice, sure, but it's absolutely effective in that way. Yeah.
Yeah. It was absolutely brilliant how they decided to do that. Almost kind of giving you a roadmap of how to listen to it. Mm-hmm. Right. Of how to listen to this music by having someone who composes it kind of explain it and describe it, Chris.
Right.
Good.
And then even like that final scene where he's writing the Requiem, and like when it's dawning on, like in Mozart's explaining it to him, and it's dawning on him what Mozart's doing, like just like that aha moment he's having, and seeing how amazing what Mozart's doing, and just as he's slowly coming to it, just the way he draws that out in that scene just really makes you feel that passion that he feels for the music. And as far as, trying to draw people with classical music, I mean, I don't know if they I'm sure they had to use the Marriage of Figaro, and I'm sure they had to use, the Magic Flute and all those, but it seems like the choices they made as far as Mozart's aware or concerned, it seems like a lot of the music that was used in the movie to me felt more accessible than a lot of classical music you might otherwise hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you talked about the end scene when Mozart's on his deathbed and he's basically dictating to Salieri, right?
Yeah.
There's the one part of that scene where Salieri's like, Mozart's like, do you have it? And he's like, you go too fast. Do you have it? You go too fast. Tom Hulce was actually skipping his lines. He was actually omitting lines that he was supposed to say to trip up F. Murray Abraham, so he would have a genuine reaction of, you're going too fast. I don't know what's going on here. And you see it. So Tom Hulce was actively skipping things and omitting his lines to confuse F. Murray Abraham. Oh, wow. And you get that genuine reaction of like, there's that one part where he's like, he's got his head in his hands. He goes, I don't know. I don't understand what you're saying. And then that's when then Tom Hulce kind of picks up, on the, second measure, second beat, blah, blah, blah. And then, do you have it? And then he's like, yeah, da, 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 and you start to see those lights, like Chris said, you start to see those lights come on in Salieri of, oh, I got it now. I understand, But just to see that process, because it was alluded to earlier in an earlier scene when Stanzi went to go see Salieri to show him his work. And she's like, I need to take these sheets with me. And he's like, well, you can't leave them. And she's like, these are originals. And he's like, what do you mean? She goes, there's no drafts. He writes it. Like he hears it in his head and he writes it, and then we got to see that in person at the very end, Roland, right? Where it's kind of like that whole, you got to see even at the guy's dying, you got to see that process. It goes,
and Salieri's awe of the process. Like he was finally in God's light, to put it in his words.
Yeah.
Like he was in the realm of God's light at that moment. That's when he refound religion. That's how I saw it. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause then,
baptism by music.
Salieri's like, oh, and that's it. And then Mozart's like, no, now we give him the real fire. So there was like even more after he thought, well, this is a pretty expansive piece. He's like, no, now we're going to add some really stuff, and the great thing about that scene is you hear each individual thing as they're talking about it. And then when Stanzi decides to come back because she left Mozart, we hear the whole thing. When the coach is, she's in the stagecoach and it's riding at night, and we hear the whole piece as one thing. So we got to hear it being built, which is brilliant. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, the next scene, she's coming back, and you hear the whole. It gives you chills. Like you don't have to like classical music to get chills from watching that scene. Absolutely magnificent. Absolutely.
Well, I think it was the creative process, and it's like watching somebody like McCartney, like when we were doing the documentary, just him coming up with stuff on the fly, and Brian Wilson did the same thing, like those kinds of things, and I think Salieri in that moment, like to Roland's point, I think it was probably the highlight of his career too, is understanding in that moment what he was doing, like, oh, I understand this. I get this. Maybe I can do this, or perhaps this realization there that had to be like, oh, this is something that I can't do on my own. But now that he's explaining it to me, or sort of deciphering it in a way, like now I get it. But I don't think he'll never be able to duplicate it. But you know what I mean? Like he'll just be, that in that moment he was, I was understanding this. I was with him, so that was a great scene. Yep.
Yeah, I thought, and there was two parts where Mozart kind of got some digs in on Salieri about Salieri's music, right? There was, when Mozart came to see Salieri, the show only, I think it might have been the Figaro or one of the other one, Marriage of Figaro. He's like, oh, it only ran, a certain amount of performances. And Salieri's like, well, you didn't give them a big bang at the end to let them know to clap. And he's like, yeah, I should take lessons from you. Like that his music is bombastic like that. And then when Mozart went to go see Salieri's play, and Salieri's like, how did you like it? And Mozart's like, one can only listen to music like this and say Salieri. Like it's kind of that's not really a compliment. It was kind of a nice way of just saying, well, you've got a particular kind of way, not necessarily my way, but it is squarely yours.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that very funny actually, because it was such a dig without trying to be a dig, but it was such an awkward, prolonged moment.
Yeah.
I was like, that is great. It's very, there's a lot of that. That's why I was saying too early, before, that these really weren't his peers. He was probably the only person who opened the door for Mozart. No one else would even open the door, and you felt that a little bit with the other deleted scene. And his peers, he just couldn't talk about these things because they weren't his connection to money. There was no money.
Mm.
That's it. So it's a very interesting dynamic with all the main characters.
Yeah. Do you guys think that because of the relationship that he had with his father obviously coming from money, he kind of wanted to get away from that in a sense, and he was on hard times, and do you think that Salieri kind of represented that sort of arrogance, that sort of that's the reason why he felt that he was so judgmental of his music, or giving them those digs, that kind of thing, or do you think he might have been goading him into trying to do better?
I think from my opinion, his father and Salieri, they sort of represent, like you're saying, a very similar character of learned talent and jealousy of a born talent that never stops learning. And I think he's surrounded by that. Yeah. Why are you living the high life? The father hates that he lives the high life because he never could. I read this trivia too in IMDb or in Wiki about Mozart, like every geek out there. And, his father was essentially a court musician who just taught, and his son was so talented, he just taught his son because that's where he's going to get his money from. I mean, this is literally Britney Spears' dad, all over again. So it's taken into modern terms. And Salieri is, the reality show host who used to be a singer. He's Fatone. Was it Joey Fatone? The fat one? He's that.
Sort of a level of decorum that they have to, to
show they're part of the aristocracy, but they're not. They're always really just servants. Yeah. They're just employees. Whereas Mozart is a talent. And I think that's the rub for them. That's just how I see it.
Yeah. Chris.
I think to some degree, both of them see Mozart as almost taking it for granted. Like him not truly realizing what he has, that there's not many people, as much as they might want to be, the next great writer or composer, they can't do what he does. And it's almost like, I think to a degree, both of these guys are jealous and are almost angry because they feel like he's taking it for granted and doesn't really truly appreciate what it is that has the ability to do.
Mm.
But don't all people like all those characters sort of think that way, where they say, if I had your talent, you have no idea what I would do. But it does fit like that line, like you're saying, it does fit that perspective.
Yeah, there's the scene when Mozart's father comes to live with him. He leaves Salzburg and comes, and his father says, "Well, don't you have pupils?" Like you said, there was expectations of how you conducted yourself as a musician. You worked for the emperor or whoever, or a religious figure, a holy figure, like he did in Salzburg, and you had pupils. That's how you made your money. And Amadeus is Mozart's like, no. He goes, I don't have time for that because I won't have time for composition. And his father's like, composition doesn't make you money though, right? So there was that almost like that stage father relationship of him trying to guide his son into doing business, the right thing. But like a true rock star, like I don't want to do that. Like that's, it was only when he became desperate and at the very end for money, when he went back to Kenneth Macmillan's character and said, hey, I'm ready to teach your daughter. And he's like, she got married like 5 years ago. Like she's not like where have you been? Like what's happening to you, Mozart? Like, you're right. Like it makes it seem like it's not a long stretch of time. But then when that guy says that, it's like, my daughter's like married. It's like,
Yeah, he kind of spit in his face, didn't he? Like when he told him, he's like, I don't want to teach any more of your dogs or whatever. And he just storms out. Like, he didn't forget that. Yeah, that's a and I can't. And both those scenes are great. I'm sorry they weren't in the film to begin with, but yeah.
Yeah, because they kind of positioned Mozart as kind of like this kind of pedophile-y guy. Like, don't let him near your daughter. So there was that scene was uncomfortable because
Yeah.
The girl is sitting at the piano and she looks terrified, and Mozart's like oblivious, like, no, let me, I'll play along or play something, play whatever you want. And she's like all like about to like break down, start crying,
I think she was more afraid of the dogs and their reaction because the father liked the dogs more. That's how I read it. I was like, she must be terrified of those friggin' dogs because they rule the house.
I read it that she had like that word had gotten out, or that she had heard it, or the father seemed oblivious, but
Well, that was Salieri's doing.
I was going to say Salieri put it out there.
Yeah. He put it out there.
Sabotage,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm saying that.
Because basically he said like, I heard he molested two girls, a couple of girls.
He was a bit of a womanizer before he got married.
Oh, absolutely.
So, I mean, there is some. It wasn't like, hey, he's all innocent. He was pretty much saying, I'll marry you to everybody. They even joke about it. He said it to Marie Antoinette when he fell, I'll marry me. That was his MO.
I suppose it was very easy for Salieri to because of his behavior to kind of say these things about him.
Yeah.
And to really use that against him,
it was. He's a creative. Yeah. Creative people tend to
very eccentric, very wild,
very eccentric, and sort of just finding his own path because the genius, his talent, his genius. I don't use that word lightly. Helped make who he was and guide his path.
Yeah, so and very conceited though. He wasn't very humble, which is kind of it's kind of like that also kind of works against you because he didn't understand why he had to submit his stuff, why he had to audition for things, because he's like, I'm the best, and that's when the kind of advisor to the emperor is like, you can use a little humility will go a long way with you. But
I enjoyed that he showed that not everyone was against him. There were some people in the court who were like, listen, there's a way to do this. You can be really awesome if you just follow this path a little bit. We're not saying just make better choices. You just got to make some better choices. That's all it is. And they were trying to get him to the right place. So, and that was a great thing with the story too, that it wasn't everybody against him. So he wasn't cornered in. He just picked the wrong people to confide in.
Yeah. One of the great thing about this film as well is we get to see some really nice extended set pieces of the operas.
Yeah.
Which is kind of really nice to get exposed in small chunks, to the magic flute. To Don Giovanni, to see to see some of these extended pieces, I'm going to assume that they were probably staged the way they were staged back then.
They were.
The only thing that is incorrect, though, there is one factually thing is conductors didn't do all the hand waving back then. Conductors back then actually were like first or second violin. So they'd actually be seated with the orchestra, and the rest of the orchestra would be looking to the head movements and the nods of the conductor. So all that kind of fancy arm waving didn't really start until the next century. But Chris, what do you got?
I was going to say, to your point about the stage sets and the setups, the theater where Don Giovanni was filmed, they actually filmed that in candlelight. That was not, they didn't use real regular lighting. That all those candles were actually lit, and there was a point where
the whole film only used natural lighting.
Yeah,
they didn't use any screen any movie lights.
It's amazing.
They used only candlelight and sunlight, and I think just like thin paper and stuff like that, just a diffuse light up from windows. So beautifully, when you look at that, it's really well done.
The cinematography is fantastic.
Yeah, some of the shots were really, really pretty.
And that was filmed in Prague. Because Vienna they could not film in Vienna because Vienna had to become too industrialized modern, and too kind of modern. Yeah. But Milos Forman found Prague, and it had the look that they needed. It had that kind of.
Isn't he from Prague? I think he's from.
Yeah, that's where he's from. Yeah, so he was able to kind of go to his hometown.
They only built 4 set pieces for the entire film.
Yeah.
Everything else was in the original locations. They found locations that replicated.
Yeah,
and I think they premiered the opera in the same theater it actually premiered in.
Yeah, it is.
So they shot it in the exact same theater.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah, that's great. It's a beautiful piece of history. I mean, it does make you. And the last opera made my toes tap. So when he was dying, I was like, "You son of a bitch! I know you guys are in canary suits, and I'm freaking loving this. And why is it ending?"
The magic flute. That was, when they're dressed like the birds. And,
I loved it. I was like,
that's a great scene. Simon Callow in that scene is.
He's great. Yeah. He's so good in that. He's so good.
Yeah, and there was that great misdirection. We skip over a lot of plot in this because there's a lot to watch. We encourage you to watch it, but Salieri basically kind of disguises himself and kind of pays Mozart to write a death mass, and he keeps coming to pay him or to check in on it, and then Mozart becomes terrified, doesn't want to answer the door. So there's that great scene when there's a knock at the door and Mozart's like, tell him I'm working on it. Tell him I'm, go away. I'll have it. And Stanzi opens the door and it's actually, Simon Callow's character with the receipts. Mm-hmm. But we think that it's going to be Salieri in that black garb, just like his father.
Salieri opens the door. He says Stanzi. Yep. Salieri opens the door.
That's right. No, I thought Stanzi.
No,
there was two different times. There was
two. Yeah,
right. Stanzi goes and meets Mozart at the door and says it's not a ghost. Yeah. And after the play, it's Salieri who comes. Yeah, and he's like, "Who's going to be?"
Salieri's the one that collected the gate.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a great. It's a heartless beat because you almost feel sympathy and you think Salieri is going to turn and he doesn't. And you're like, wow, there's more to this.
Yeah, because Salieri was in the end game. Yeah. Salieri was in the end game at that point. So it's kind of like we're at the finish. And that's when Stanzi comes back and says, you're not working on this anymore. Takes the whole thing from Salieri's grasp and locks it away. Said this is not to be worked on. Although Mozart did work, he didn't work with Salieri on it. He did work with somebody on that mass. It turns out in 2016, somebody was doing research and found out that Mozart and Salieri did collaborate once or twice. They actually did collaborate on some work, and that was as recent as 2016. That was finally discovered. So again, take this for what it is. It's a semi-factual. There is a structure, there's a framework. These were real people. A lot of the events were real. The struggles of Mozart trying to get his work done in the emperor's court was all factual. This part, although the Salieri killing Mozart fan theory it started in the 1800s, around 1830 is when someone actually did a play about it and said, that Salieri kills Mozart. So this kind of thing was kind of around, even though it wasn't really true. I read a book after I got into Amadeus. There was a book called 1791, Mozart's Last Year, and I read that about what he was doing. And it was they don't really know what he died from. It could have been a stomach thing, could have been alcoholism, but there was a whole bunch of different things. But it absolutely wasn't Salieri, Chris. Sorry to let you down.
It was not. I was going to say what you just had said about the rumor had started more than 200 years ago.
Yeah. So it was kind of while Salieri was still alive, it kind of bothered him a little bit. And Salieri in real life wasn't as chaste as they portray him here. He had a wife. He had a couple of kids. He had like 8 kids.
I was going to say his 8 kids or something. Yep.
And a mistress on the side. So he wasn't this pious, chaste man, but it works though. This whole thing. Let's get to some favorite scenes then. We talked a lot about a lot of them, and I probably kind of gave some of mine, but we'll go around with one because I think we hit a lot of them already. Chris, what do you have for a favorite?
Definitely my favorite, I think, is the end where he's writing with Mozart and Mozart's he's scribing for Mozart. And then, I talked about that one already, but the other one that always stood out to me, because I remember from seeing it when I was a kid, is the one where they're asking people to name composers, and then Salieri says, play Salieri, and he starts making fun of him. Like that scene, I think is, I don't know, I know it's insignificant, but for some reason it always kind of sticks in my mind.
Yeah, because they were, what it is it proves that to each other's faces they were cordial, but behind each other's backs, right, exactly. When they didn't think they were there, they were kind of backbiting each other. Mozart didn't really think too much of Salieri's music when Salieri wasn't in front of him. And much like, and then Salieri was cordial to Mozart, but then behind his back was kind of all these little machinations to kind of throw up these little roadblocks to him. So Roland, what do you got?
Like I said, pretty much every scene where he's honest. But I will say at the end, right before the last scene of the writing, when he brings him back to his house after Mozart collapses, and he asks him, how did it go? What did you think of it? And he says it was extraordinary. For that moment, they had this beautiful connection of just the music, of just understanding the music, of completion and appreciation. And I'm a crier. I'll say it. So in that moment, I got a little choked up. I was like, son of a bitch, that felt real. And that's all I could think in my head. Son of a bitch, that felt real. So,
it was a go. Yeah, they got you in the feels.
It did a little bit.
Got you in the feels.
Yeah, got me a little bit in the feels. I held myself.
A gentle caress, a self caress.
I always do. It's always a self caress, my friend. I don't get rough with me.
Roland is always so gentle with himself. Eric, what do you got?
Well, like Chris, I like the end. Of course, is the best scene, I think. But there was a scene I wanted to comment on it before when we were talking about how like he was hanging out with these people, even Simon Callow's character. And I guess I'm going to use this scene as that example, and it is a great scene because he comes to the place and he's like, what have you got for me? Is it done yet? It's like you promised me that we'd start rehearsing this and you would have it done, and he was obviously working on his big opus, and he just at that point. But then in the very like a scene or two later, he's out partying with him. Like it's like. That relationship is they are good friends, but they're when it comes to business, I mean they're not afraid to. He isn't afraid to show his frustration with him, but at the same token, he's out there drinking and he's like doing this, and they're all like hanging out till like what was it 6 o'clock in the morning. He comes back home, right, and the wife is gone, and so that was that struck me funny. It was just like I was thinking at that point. I think even this guy had enough of him, enough of his sort of callous attitude and his BS. But no, that wasn't the case at all. Like we pointed out, I mean, they're still very much in that company, and they're worshiping him, and and it's just that those are Milos Forman is a very. I think he loves scenes like that. His movies like that are always jovial like that. There's big parties and things like that. Like Fireman's Ball, I think, is a movie that I'd never seen it, but apparently that kind of thing happens in that film a lot. And it's just like life and people, even in the most worst circumstances, people know how to live in the moment. So that kind of struck me as that's a great scene. He's like, so they, he's not taking, obviously, but it's not that big of a deal, and it will get done. Maybe he trusts him. I don't know, but it's like he doesn't care. They're out partying. I think that was great. So
yeah, there's a little parallel with Cuckoo's Nest, right?
Mm-hmm.
McMurphy sneaking around at the end has this all-night Bender party, all-nighter. And then faces the consequences in the morning, and the same thing. Mozart sneaks out, goes to an all night Bender party, comes home, and his wife is gone. So he kind of little bit of a parallel of Milos Forman films. I'm going to go with everybody loves the end. I think we can all kind of say like that end scening is just like it's amazing. But I'm going to go with also the whole Don Giovanni sequence. Because that's where Salieri was watching Don Giovanni and understanding about the relationship of Mozart's father, like the figure of a dead commander coming to accuse his son and call him out in front of everybody, putting everybody on notice, including Mozart, and then he's like a man being ripped in two, like he was just kind of feeling like watching the opera and feeling all the emotion. Right, because he was having a moment of understanding of what was happening on the stage, and it wasn't just a story. He saw that the representation of his father accusing Mozart and kind of condemning him was being displayed on the stage, and Salieri seemed like he was the only person that saw it. That could only was the only one that picked up on it. So it was, again, there's so much great work by F. Murray Abraham, and he really just like knocked it out of the park with this film. Like Roland said, there's like a cast for days in this of great supporting people. But that's what makes this even better, is that he was able to even rise up even through all that and really kind of put the movie on his shoulders, because if it was too broad, if it was too jokey, there was the times when it was jokey and it was correct. And then there's times when he's scheming and it's correct. And then there's times when he's just being honest and open with himself about the music. So like Roland said at the beginning, all the different layers that this character had, that F. Murray Abraham had to balance each layer in the right way, and when to call it up, and what was it appropriate to be genuine with Mozart? When was it appropriate to be scheming? When was it appropriate to, it's just such a tour de force acting job by him.
Mm-hmm.
And then even just his interactions with the priest, like, when you kind of fast forward to the present, and like just the way he's explaining everything, like in a very matter of fact, I don't know, his delivery during those sequences, I thought it was really good too. It did just something about it. I thought he did I thought that really kind of enhanced his performance in the scenes, going back to the Mozart's time.
Especially in the beginning when Salieri plays the song and he's like, the priest's like, no, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that. And he's like, how about this one? And the priest like kind of rolls his eyes and it's like, dun, 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 dun. And then the priest's like, ba, 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 da, ba, da, ba.
I know that.
It's like, oh, that's charming. Salieri's like, that's not me. That was Mozart.
That's great.
It's like, oh, burn.
Comment has to be given about the priest too. We really didn't talk about him, but boy, by the end of that conversation, he is a mess. I mean, he's like, eyes are bloodshot. He's got the 5 o'clock shadow.
He's destroyed.
Yeah, he is absolutely shaken by this story. Yeah, that's a great.
Yeah, he like a confession that he didn't want. He thought he was going to see this old guy, this crazy old man, and by the end, he heard a story for the ages about condemning God and being the spirit of mediocrity. So that's going to do it for this episode. I think this is available on streaming. It's available on all different streaming services. There's probably some physical media out there as well. Don't let the classical music scare you. Don't let the period piece scare you. I guarantee this movie will draw you in. It is just one of those movies that it gives the appearance on the outside that it's one thing, but when you sit down and watch it, you're drawn in because it is just so related. What it is, it's relatable. That's the word I was looking for. It's very relatable. It's not hoity-toity and I can't really connect to this. The way these people act, just the way that the script is written. They're speaking in plain language. They're not using words that are kind of like, I don't know what that is. They're just kind of talking regular. They just happen to be in Vienna and happens to be the late 1800s or 1700s. So it's a very relatable thing. Plus, the music is just off the charts, gorgeous. It got me into classical music. Once I saw this, I'm like, oh wow, this is just something really beautiful and great to listen to. So come for the music, stay for the movie. Or stay for the movie and come for the music and enjoy all of it. It's just a one whole great experience. So it's Amadeus from 1984, Best Picture winner. And that's going to wrap up this episode, number 2 in our Oscars month of March of 2024. So, Mr. Christopher Clark, thank you so much for joining us on your first movie.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
How did it feel to not mention Jeff Lynne in that? Oh,
well, you just did.
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you very much. Well done, sir. Appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing you once again. Mr. Roland DeRucci, the Ready Speaker Podcast. Check the show notes. There's going to be a link there, or if you're watching us on YouTube, just type in Ready Speaker and it'll come up. He's got some great material there. Great movie analysis. He does a lot of the newer stuff too. He's hip. We're living in the past here. We're living in 1791. He's living in 2024.
Thank you. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, of course, Roland. Thank you. And of course, Eric and I, we're here in our seats waiting for you each week to bring you a new episode of Music and Movie Goodness. So go ahead and subscribe and follow us on your favorite podcast provider. The easy hint, new episodes come out every Thursday. We just gave it all away. There'll be no pop quiz at the end of this episode, so go check us out. So for Chris, for Roland, and of course for Mr. Eric Kuber, this is Mr. Dean Legiro, asking you to please be kind and rewind.
You've been listening to the 3324 podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 podcast and on Twitter at 3324p to join the conversation.